Well, let's go ahead and get started. For those of you who I don't know, my name's Palmer Muntz, and I am co-chair for professional development for PNACAC. And my partner is Ray Pepley, who usually is here doing the hosting. But Ray got a doctor's appointment for one of her kids, and you know how it is when they give you an appointment slot, you just kind of have to take it. And so she was very disappointed to have to miss today's session. Um, our topic today is guiding students through the constellation of majors and careers. And this is actually a reboot, an updated replay of a workshop that was done at the Super ACAC conference in Spokane last spring. And it got great reviews. And so Ray wanted to bring it to you all today for our webinar series. So for many students, choosing a major can be really stressful. And there's terms that get used like impact majors and separate admission and major wait list. But what do those things mean? Why are certain majors harder than others? What if students change their mind? Different colleges have different policies around these different things. So our presenters today, we're so glad to have you with us, are Adrienne Loveland. And Adrienne is a regional admissions counselor for the University of Wyoming, based in Colorado. Some of you, many of you probably know Adrienne because she also covers Oregon and Washington for the University of Wyoming. So I imagine she's a familiar face for some of you. And Diane Campbell is a counselor at Liberty Common High School in Colorado. And so with that, I'm going to turn it over to them and they can give a more complete introduction. Diane and Adrienne, we're so glad you're with us. And I'm looking forward to hearing what you have to say, and I'm sure everyone else is too. Oh, some housekeeping. I'm sorry. Let me mention this. Sorry, Ray does this stuff, not me. If you wish, the chat is open as well as Q&A. So you're welcome to put questions or comments there. Erin Jensen, who is our tech chair for PNACAC, is here as well, and she and I will kind of monitor the chat and the Q&A. You cannot turn on your microphone and talk to us, but you can communicate with us through the chat and the Q&A. And we'd love to have, please do so, okay? And now I'll shut up and turn it over to Diane and Adrienne. Welcome, thank you.
Thank you, Palmer. Yes, Adrienne and I are thrilled to be here. And yes, a reboot. That's what I think is great as presenters. It always gives us great feedback that we learn more. So that's really our hope today, that some of you are here to learn how to help students through the constellation of many majors. It's maybe a space for some of you like me at this time of year where you're like, am I doing the right career? Should I be rethinking? But really what we're hoping today is that we are going to discuss, the current majors and careers that are out there, but probably hope to dispel a lot of what Palmer was saying around some of, the verbiage used around majors in our conversations with students and families about choosing majors and careers. Most importantly, and PNACAC's so fantastic to have a session like this for you, but when we attend sessions, we hope that we really can walk away with some resources that we can implement within our buildings. So we want to give you all the resources and also hope that you'll share some of the things that you're using so we all can continue to learn together. And then Adrienne's going to shift to, some of the trends she's seen on the college side as far as major students are turning to or turning away from. And then most importantly, how colleges can support students when they finally do choose their place to venture onto next and what that looks like for them if they truly are undecided. And that's what we hope to do today is kind of talk about the ways that we can change our narrative in how we're talking to students. Again, I think we all know and would never argue the point that choosing a major can be one of the most stressful, undefined processes for a lot of our students. A lot of times they feel they can't choose colleges or what's next for them after high school until they even know what they want to do. We know the reality is that a lot of them don't have the social emotional maturity to make that decision first and foremost, but they really embed a lot of stress and uncertainty and an unfortunate, self-reflection around some of these things we have listed here. And also how parents might see their student. This must mean that they don't want to go to college, and they're not going to succeed, and they're going to hit all these barriers in life because they don't know. When in fact, that's one of the things that we need to change in reassuring our students and most importantly, parents, that undecided doesn't mean lost or clueless. And I think a lot of us are seeing, and Adrienne will talk about that as well. A lot of colleges are changing that terminology to make it sound, fancier or less intimidating. We call it exploratory studies. So that's just, if we can share with parents too, that it's really okay. And how can students not be confused? I mean, this is just a snippet of so many majors out there. And I think we can also agree that most of our students truly think there's about 3 pathways out there. If they're helpers and love science, they want to choose pre-med or nursing. If they've been told they're great at math, they're probably thinking engineering. And then for entrepreneurial minds, or I don't know what I want to do, they choose business. They really do think that there's about 3 to 4 tracks of majors, when we know there's so much more. So when we're changing our conversations, or even the visuals we're putting in front of students, really helping them to understand more about their aptitudes and their personalities and their interests, sometimes even starting with students around what do you not like, to dispel some of this confusion around, I have to find this perfect major or career that I'm going to do for the rest of my life. So helping students, are you truly a data person? Do you love these classes in high school, science and math? Let's look at some majors that maybe relate to that type of interest and personality. I think too, there's a lot of interesting data out there too that shows that students changing their mind is very common, but in the end isn't a detriment to a lot of our students. We're finding that about 80% of students do change their mind. Right now, it's about 45 to 50% of students who enter college do enter in the exploratory studies pathway. So I think this is important to reassure parents that it is more common than not. And I think for a lot of us too, when we're working with very successful, gifted, or just, high flyer students who really could choose anything and do very well at it, it's even more stressful to choose. And maybe even for some of our first generation or underserved students, or maybe students who just haven't found their niche in high school, truly do feel overwhelmed because there's so much more to learn, and taking risks as far as exploring something they might not know. And that's one thing as counselors that we can do better is look at the type of colleges that can support our students no matter where they are on that spectrum, to help them understand what can they do to help lead them to choosing that major. It's not moving, sorry. Also, just some data. I love showing slides like this to parents because this is what they're looking for in the end, right? If we're going to choose a college, where are these colleges that we can get jobs? And then at the same time, a lot of our students are asking, I don't know what college or certification program or 2-year VOTEC program might look like for me as options. But in the end, we know that some sort of certification or post-secondary training equates to jobs. So that's something to keep in mind, and talking to our students earlier on, 9th and 10th grade, reminding them that it doesn't always necessarily mean a 4-year college or university. That's a whole another session, right, around affordability, but that we're guiding our students and understanding that just extending their education and finding ways to relate those to job pathways. So of course, as a school counselor, I've been a public school counselor for a very long time, and I hopefully there's a lot of you in here as well. This is a very overwhelming piece of our job when we're expected to choose pathways, know all the jobs, know all the careers, majors, and then match the right colleges to our students when they're choosing specific pathways. So today I was just hoping to share with you some of the resources that have been helpful to me, but also some of those narratives that I'm hoping to change. And I love ideas from you is just how we can unite a little better in the school counselor role to feel less stress ourselves or less responsible when it truly is just that siloed piece when helping students around this can be truly overwhelming. It's a lot. And I think one place we can really start is changing our conversation. I think a lot of times students come to us and thinking that we're going to help them, pick something like on a restaurant menu. Like, I need to pick engineering. I need to pick psychology. Where are we starting earlier on in our younger grades with our conversations about careers and majors? Think about your school culture. What type of visuals do you have just up in the hallways or in teacher classrooms or spaces where students are hanging out? Do we have posters about careers and majors? What majors does University of Wyoming offer? Or think about the schools that your students are most interested in. Do you have a list of majors where students can look at that? Also, as counselors, what are we doing to expand our knowledge just about certain career pathways that are out there? And also majors, what colleges out there offer majors that our students are expressing interest in? And then also making that connection for our students. We all know that when students find success somewhere, we see a decrease in behavior, we find an engagement in school. And so I think there are ways that we can connect our students to understand that if they are thinking engineering, there's so many skill sets that they can learn in taking an art class or taking a business course and really helping them dispel some of those myths that they need to pick a one track pathway to a major career, but that the more classes they take, it really in the end can just benefit them in so many ways. And then also, I'm not sure if you're all familiar, but the American School Counseling Association actually has a fantastic free resource that's just how to start these conversations around career and major pathways. So I always appreciate those when I don't have to think about what am I going to say to a student. They provide that for us. And then also our parents, because as we know, sometimes they can be our hardest fans to convince why it's okay if their students might not know. The current high school that I'm in, we don't have a lot of elective courses for our students to take. So they do feel more stressed when they're not able to take maybe culinary courses or career pathway options. But just reassuring our parents that that stress and then those conversations around parents in helping their students become exposed to more careers, kind of like, what are you doing to help your student seek some opportunities where they are finding some exposure to some majors and careers? Because as we know, a lot of students either aren't familiar with what their own parents do, or they are automatically assuming that they are next in line to become that doctor, that nurse, or whatever their parents might be doing. And then also, thinking about the student and family and their cultural and personal considerations. There's a lot of personal, goals and barriers for our families sometimes as to why they're choosing certain career pathways. And just that's important for us in our conversations to maybe just, be familiar or have some insight about that as well. And then, how just in thinking of the programs that we offer in our high schools, what are some ways that we can think out of the box and maybe, change things up a bit to help our students understand majors and careers that exist there. If you're not familiar with the Teen Life website, that is a fantastic resource to look at all kinds of summer programs. If you have a student who's, excuse me, interested in journalism, it'll list all kinds of journalism programs. And they definitely are a wide range, some where students can be scholarship to attend. And we know there's some out there that have like very high costs for students to attend. But again, reminding parents that it isn't like a way into a college, but a way for a student to maybe explore an area that they're considering. I also have a link on this PowerPoint, which, by the way, this will be shared and you'll receive all the links on here. But I do have about a 10-page document that has all types of summer programs by specific majors. But also thinking about our college programming. How many of us advertise University of Wyoming is coming next Monday, or, University of Puget Sound will be here next Thursday. How many times are we talking about the majors that some of these colleges offer? One way I've been going about encouraging students to attend high school visits is advertising it specifically by major. Students, are you interested in hearing more about mechanical engineering or computer science? Come to this session. And I don't tell them the name of the college. Some of my older students are totally on to that. They're like, I know what you're doing. But it really helps our students identify and make that connection to certain majors. I ask students too. There's not better space than walking into the lunchroom and asking students, what kind of majors are you interested in? What careers are you thinking about? And then advertising college visits that way. And also creating your programming that are about majors and careers. I know a lot of you do career days. Those can be really successful, but even bringing in a couple colleges just to talk about what does a direct entry nursing program look like? What does, an impacted major look like at our university? So there's so many valuable and incredible colleges out there that can share their information in programming that can help expose them to those majors and careers as well. One resource too that I love using with students, I do this with my 9th and 10th graders. This is a resource on the College Board website that has pretty much every section of future careers. A lot of us are familiar with, the RIASIC codes of career pathways, but students love looking at this. And I just talk to them and say, just look at it. Highlight 3 to 5, things that you're interested, or cross out all the ones you don't like. So just look at ways that we can engage our students in getting them, visibly interacted with some of the choices out there. Another thing I think, when I mentioned about what are we doing as counselors to, increase our knowledge, we have to remember too that when we're talking about engineering business and pre-med, we also have to help our students understand, what are some of the majors out there that are new and upcoming and things that we're not familiar with. If you are a math student and you truly love math, have you considered digital mapping? Have you looked at data studies? There's all kinds of interesting and fascinating new majors out there that really can connect a student's interests and talents. And then, always not forgetting careers, but explaining that to students as well. What do these pathways look like if they are considering a career that can be very lucrative for our students when they're considering? So again, just having them look at, what do you think you like? What do you not like? And this is just one of the worksheets that I use with, 10th graders and 11th graders, even our seniors. They're very good at filling out that, like, I don't know what this is. And then that can help you, you know, within group meetings or one-on-one meetings to really kind of start to help them navigate the things that they are interested in. And another thing to think about, hopefully most of you on here are familiar with Ethan Sawyer, the College Essay Guys resources. Fantastic resources, obviously, when it comes to essays. But I have found that some of his resources have been really helpful when talking to students about majors and careers. You know, a lot of careers are really about values, and especially some majors. You know, what values are important to you when choosing a major? If you're a super outgoing kid and you want to be social and those are values, you really need to think about some of the majors that are out there and what are some of the personalities that are reflective of those majors. So this has been just a helpful tool for me when talking to students about that piece as well. And then some resources. As we know, you know, counselors, we just get inundated with everybody's email and, you know, platform and business that they want to share with us. So I thought what we could do is, if you have anything else that I missed or that you're not familiar with, please drop that in the chat just so we can share resources. We know there's so many things out there. You know, My Next Move, I hope you all know about that one, because that one links to the Occupational Outlook Handbook resource that shows our students every career possible, because it's in the government database. It's going to send them projections of employment in the Pacific Northwest. You know, so we know there's definitely some better, you know, resources and aptitude tests over others. But again, really thinking about your school culture, what works best. You know, there are resources like UScience, which can take a student 60 to 70 minutes to take, which is a very long time for a student to engage, where they can jump onto Big Future, or the ME3 from ASU that matches them directly to potential majors. So, and just reminding them it's a way to just gather information, just get some ideas. But resources you can share. And then also for our parents or for ourselves, so that we can, you know, stay current with, you know, what are the trends when we're considering a medical pathway. I love podcasts. You know, Future You has some fantastic podcasts specifically around careers. And then also the Georgetown University Center on Education and Workforce, some incredible resources that school counselors can just use, send out. If there's something that you're hearing within your school culture that students and families are asking about, what are the trends around, you know, computer science or artificial intelligence? They have some fantastic resources on there. And then CGN, College Guidance Network, if you're not familiar with it, there's all kinds of free, you know, webinars such as this one that families can look at as well. And then Adrienne, jumping over the college side.
Yay, all right. Well, you know, I think Diane hit on some really, really big topics. And so what we did when we presented this at the super conference, we did a poll and we surveyed the entire West Coast. So Washington, Oregon, California, Arizona, Utah, Nevada, Montana, Wyoming, Colorado, New Mexico. That's kind of our wonky line, but that's where we stopped to incorporate counselors, CBOs in the Pacific Northwest, so Pennacac, Whack-Ack, Western, and Ramacac regions. And we got an astounding response from all the counselors saying, we just wanted to know, what are you hearing students talk about now? Because, you know, and Diane had it on a slide, but it seems with every major television show, a new major pops up. So she had Selling Sunset. So we're hearing now, of course, I want to be a real estate agent. Of course you do. And when CSI was really popular, who didn't want to have a CSI major? So we're just curious what what students are thinking the next path are, because Diane showed you that slide with all these new majors that are becoming very popular with the blockchain, with digital mapping, but students are really talking about computer science. Engineering's always going to be at the forefront, but business, psychology, nursing, and we really feel as though nursing became that big popular major because of the pandemic. Everybody cares, everybody wants to help, which is fantastic. But we'll talk about this more. Nursing is one of those. It's a very high impact major. And then, of course, criminology. I think the CSI effect is still there. But these are the big 6 majors that was astoundingly at the top of that survey, what students are really looking for. So because, as you know, there are going to be students what they're not talking about. I think, again, because of the impact of COVID and the pandemic and having to teach at home and see the stress that teachers were under, people aren't interested in education anymore, which is a little scary. Communications is going away. And I think under that umbrella, it's because we're starting to get very pointed in that degree program. So you're seeing more sports analytics, you're seeing more blogging, more sports talk communications, so that when students were doing a broad degree such as communications, unsure what they exactly wanted to do, now they can do more pointed. So I think that's why communication is not as popular. But sadly, our liberal arts and fine arts are also starting to go to the wayside. On the college side, and talking to my colleagues, we're seeing a lot of students who love fine arts, but to Diane's point earlier about the parental conversations, is when they heard, I want to be a theater major, it instantly, they started pulling out the jar of Tums, and the parents are eating. They're like, you're going to live at home with me forever, pick a career. So I think students now are seeing, oh, okay, I want to do theater, I want to do symphony or the marching band as an extracurricular when I get to college, not necessarily a major. And then anthropology and archaeology is the other one that is not as popular. I think, though, it was interesting when talking to colleagues, somebody mentioned the TV show thing. They said, you know what needs to happen to those 2 majors is there needs to be an Indiana Jones type show come out where people are doing digs and it's really exciting, and that will become more popular. So this is what we got from the study. So for those of you that did respond to this, we really appreciate it, because this was very eye-opening, but also, you know, it really kind of drove home the point to us at colleges on what we need to do about some of these majors, because we do need educators. You know, there's such a shortage now, and there are districts that are offering signing bonuses and offering housing so that they can live for free, so that they'll be interested in being an educator. So there are some things that on the college side we're doing to try and switch this conversation a little bit. So we really need to up the recruitment game. We as recruiters, we as institutions, we need to start talking about some unique majors and the programs. Again, back to Diane's slide with some of those. When we visit your school, instead of just saying, oh, we're getting new buildings and everything is fantastic, we just beat Texas Tech, whatever it is, that's really great knowledge for you. But I think one of the things in our quick time with you is we need to tell you, here's what we have that's unique to us. Here is what we're starting to see students do with this major, so that you kind of have your toolkit of when a student comes to you and says, I'm interested in this career, but I don't really know how to get there, or is that a thing? You can say, yeah, actually, I was talking to Palmer and they do have this in Fairbanks. So I think that's going to be a really important thing that we need to start doing. But I would ask you as counselors, when you meet with an admissions representative, kind of fuel that conversation by saying, hey, what unique majors do you have? The response you'll get is, I don't know if we have anything unique. Yes, we do. Yes, we do. We have really different majors, but to us, when we get a lot of students for it, we kind of think that it's just the normal thing. But to you, when we start saying we have blockchain, we have professional sales, we have an outdoor leadership program, that is going to be something you're not always going to be hearing. the other thing, we need to sort of increase some enrollment in specific programs. You know, we get a lot of students that are like, I want to be I'm a marine biologist. And if the title doesn't say marine biology, they don't feel like they'll get a career in that. When in fact, they can take an unorthodox route. They could do just biology or an environmental studies and get their concentration in marine sciences. They can come even to a landlocked state like Iowa or Colorado or Nebraska and do that. So they're not trying to be in those places with the very high impact, and do an internship or study abroad or do a domestic abroad exchange, or excuse me, a domestic exchange program and work in that. So there are some different routes for students that are willing to do that, but I understand the biggest challenge is most likely their parents. Students sometimes seem to be open to listening a little more. It's us helicopter mom and dads that feel as though we need to take a traditional route. Also, I think we need to really look at what some of these demands are, and if they're undecided, which I agree with everything Diane said, and Palmer put this in the chat, being undeclared is great, but helping them see that there are a lot of different things that they can do, and it's okay if you don't know. And also that soft skills and leadership growth is just as important. And I'll show you a slide here in regard to that. But the other thing I really think admissions folks needs to talk about and really encourage students who are not sure is to think about living and learning communities in the residence halls. Most every school in the country have these, but this is a great time to meet other students that are interested in that career path. You'll take those specific classes, you'll be with potentially like-minded students. And if you get in that and you're like, no, this is not even in the interest field I once thought it was, great. It's just another resource for those students to figure it out. You know, there are some institutions, and many of you know this, that don't even let students declare a major as an undergraduate those first 2 years. And at first, when I heard that, like so many others, thought, oh gosh, but really, that's probably not a bad idea anymore, because they give them a couple years to make sure that you like math, but that doesn't always mean you have to be an engineer. You could be a great teacher. You could be a great accountant. You could be a great history major. Just because you're good at that doesn't mean that always has to be the path that you take. So on the next slide, these are those soft skills I was telling you about. And this is what employers are really starting to look for. Yes, it's great to know that you're trained in accounting, but can you communicate to somebody when you're handing over a tax return what those numbers mean? What does a revenue statement mean? So if they can articulate what they're learning and what needs to be communicated to potential clients, is something that is really hard to teach. So employers are starting to want that more. Same with their critical thinking and problem solving skills. You know, in this society, really, there's so many issues that need that creative approach or tweaking something that's always been done to get a new answer. Also, the ethical decision making was really interesting to me to see it so high, because of anymore there's so many scandals, there's some distrust with different organizations and industry. So knowing that a student, when they come out and they understand how to make that this may not be what you want, but this is how this should be, is important to industry. Same with teamwork and the creative innovation. We're dealing with a generation that is born of the Google Doc. They do Google Forms, Google Docs, Google presentations. So they work as a team, yet independently. And I think industry is really seeing the value in that. They understand how to work together, but they can take their pieces and do it on their own. On the next slide, we have some improvement to do too. We really need to, like I was talking about with the marine biology and kind of helping them see some unorthodox, unfamiliar paths, that's okay, that you're still going to get a great job. And honestly, it's just like the med school piece. Everybody wanted a unique undergraduate to get into med school. Might take them longer than 4 years, but yes, they can be a pre-med track with a English undergrad to make them more competitive. But honestly, that can help in some of these different programs and degrees that they want to get. We really do need to do more for our first gen and underserved students so that they understand career planning. A lot of times we don't do that well. They come to us and they say, "Oh, this is what I declared," and we're not doing a good job asking some follow-up questions of, why are you interested in that? What excites you about that career path? Do you know what that entails to be a nurse? It's 4 years, it's competitive. You are going to take a lot of health science and math and science classes. Do you like that enough to do it for 4 years? I am a pre-med dropout. I liked math, but science is 1000% not my jam. Organic chemistry drove that point home clearly. So I loved that my professor in that class sat down with me and he said, "You're really struggling with this class. You have 4 more years, maybe more of this. Is this something you feel like you can overcome and you can get through?" And he knew my answer as I started crying at his desk saying, "There's not a prayer I can get through one more day of this, let alone years." And so he helped me change my major. But I think we need to have those conversations a little more with students so they understand what a major is. Instead of some of the glory that they have kind of pre-decided that degree has. And also, exploratory studies is really becoming the trend for undecided. But I think undecided is a very bold move for students, understanding that they don't know. And that's great. We're also encouraging students on the college side, if they like the health sciences, kind of like Diane was talking about, they're helpers, they're doers, that's what they think they want to go into, they can come in as a health science undeclared student. So they can get into the math and science classes that are necessary for that pathway, but they haven't pigeonholed themselves to just nursing or just PA or just pharmacy. They have an opportunity to kind of explore their options a little better. They can do this with business, they can do this with engineering, so that they can kind of see what those disciplines entail and what fits the bill a little better for them. But it kind of fits, it does something for parents too. They know their kiddo has a degree path, just not exactly sure if I'm a chemical or electrical engineering. The career services, I think, is something we underutilize with our students. So often they have an idea of what they want to do, but the path is a little squiggly how they get there. So letting them know of these resources, that they're free, they can go all the time to those, they have advisors and counselors to help them through that stage, and really pushing them to utilize those, not only when they're seeking a degree, but while they're a student as well. So I think the other thing that we can do is we need to be a little more transparent with you as counselors and our families on impact majors and what that really means at our institution. As you know, impact majors, we're getting more apps than we have seats for. So is there a wait list program? And really, what does that mean? And how many students are they taking off the wait list? And I hope this presentation empowers you as counselors. If the representative that comes to your institution doesn't know, that you feel that you can reach out to the institution and ask these questions. Because again, students may have this idea of the only path that they need to go, but there's other ways to get it. And there's so many schools in the United States with over 4,000 institutions. They're getting in somewhere. They're going to get a great degree, but it may not be exactly what they thought that they're going to be doing when they first started this process. Same with computer science. You saw in that survey how big this is becoming. And with that many students putting that at the top of their list, those programs are going to get harder and harder to get into. I think the other thing that happens a lot with students is they see that there are some institutions that don't have pre-requirements to get into that program. It may just be a general admission, and they instantly think, oh, nope, it's no good. It's not a good program. And that's not always the case. I would argue that it's never the case. They just may have a different demographic of students they serve. The program may just have a lot of space. They may have a new program, so we're looking to fill it. And there are some institutions that just go with the ideal of, We believe in giving every student a chance. And if they don't like it, or if it's not right for them, they'll find out. It in no way makes it better or worse than other programs. You know, nursing and a lot of those health sciences, we're seeing a lot of direct entry programs. This is another great question to ask, is what happens if you're not direct entry? What is the chance of them getting in as just a pre-pharmacy or a pre-physical therapy or whatever major? What is that chance? So also, I think, you know, like I said, I really do hope that you feel empowered to reach out to the school and ask, because we need to be telling you that and being transparent with you. So we gave you
do
a lot
have a
of
question.
Yeah.
Yeah, which I love. I think Vanessa had asked a questions about sports psychology. I'll just share a resource, and then if you have more information, one of the resources I had on there was Road Trip Nation. I don't know how familiar a lot of you are with that, but there is a video on there about what does a sports psychologist do, how they motivate athletes or even teams to make that mind-body connection. From what I understand, and you can certainly speak to that, Adrienne, you know, it's a psychology major. There are certain colleges that do have that sports psychology track. But yeah, Road Trip Nation, and then any career that a student is asking about, again, I always guide them to the Occupational Outlook Handbook, because again, that's the space where they can research any career and find, you know, projected incomes and salaries, especially within certain regions.
Yes, it most likely would be psychology. But again, you know, if it doesn't say sports psychology, the psychology program can still get them there. It depends on, you know, doing some internships and doing some job shadowing in their grad program. And I think also having a conversation with them that they're not going to get that degree and walk in and be a sports psychologist for the Seattle Seahawks. Although lovely and the big dream, they may have to start small. And I think sometimes students don't want to start small. They may start with Broomfield Soccer Club, a local soccer club in an area, and then move their way up. So it will be a process. But again, psychology can get them exactly where they need to go in not being sports psychology.
Yeah, and Nancy, you bring up a great comment too. I think that's an even bigger beast that the school counselors were trying to understand and keep track of, you know, does the student need to select that major when applying? Do they need to declare it? Yes, there are certainly tracks, you know, when you're even around performing arts and theater. A lot of times that conversation is understanding, is it a college that maybe they don't get into the major, they can still be admitted exploratory science and then hopefully get into that major, they stay on track? Or is it a college where if they don't get into the major, they don't get into the program or the school? There's very, you know, very different as to how colleges look at that. But I think we're pretty much, you know, the same type of majors: nursing, engineering, even some of those, you know, BSMD programs, some art programs, performing arts. You know, if you don't get into Baldwin Wallace and musical theater, forget it. You know, you're not going to get in. So being familiar with some of those colleges where is there that chance, you know, even here at CU Boulder in Colorado, if I don't get into engineering or into Leeds School of Business, yes, you still can be admitted to the university.
Maybe related to that, I was curious to have you comment about, I'm thinking of one particular university in California that I believe requires you to declare a major, and it's very difficult to change majors. Do you have thoughts about how to navigate that as you're counseling your high school students?
Yeah, I think we all know that school. You know, and I think it's back to the list. That's the important conversation when, you know, thinking again of that space where that student is saying, I think I want to be a mechanical engineer. And they truly might want that. But then let's make sure that your list feels balanced. Just short plug, I'm just not a believer in the Dream Stretch Foundation probable anymore. I'm just a counselor that says, do we have a predictable and unpredictable list? And some of those schools you may not get in, and you may not know that that's the major you want. But if you get in, you can decide, but do you also have some very predictable schools that you can choose that major because you're in that space as a high school student that's has allegiance to that pathway, and you might change your mind, and that's okay. And I think it's encouraging parents too to really seek out colleges that if they don't know, or they do know, is it a space where a college is really going to help nurture that student in understanding different pathways or combining a different major they're interested in.
And I think you hit a big piece, Diane. You said when they come to you and say, I think I want to be this, it's probably better to go to an institution where if you might end up being civil, electrical, etc. And that school is being very transparent with you. If you, when you come in as mechanical, you will end in mechanical. And so if the first thing that comes out of your student's mouth is, I think, or it sounds cool, it might not be the right institution for their list.
Harry put something in the chat. One of you mentioned just in passing signing bonuses, and she was wondering if you could expand on that for certain majors.
Yeah, I was talking about education. There's a lot of school districts that are offering signing bonuses for students to get in and come into their districts. It's
Harry
not all.
wants to have an exact list of those because she's planning on working on a resume right now.
I can hear it. I can hear it from Colorado. Yeah, and they're offering housing allowances too. Colorado's a good example. Aspen, because it's so expensive to live there, they pay for their teachers' housing, and they give them a season lift ticket so they can ski. But yeah, so there's I don't have a list. I could probably ask around to some colleagues, but when we were told about it from our Department of Education, some of the numbers they were throwing out, I too was going to fire up my resume and consider teaching second grade. And then I hung out with my niece for a weekend and quickly realized I won't be teaching second grade.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think too, you know, being aware of some of the state legislation that is in place for, you know, certifications. I mean, that's specifically to Colorado, but I know some other states that have some legislation in place that does pay for a student's certification program or post-secondary education in various careers. There's another question on here, Adrienne, maybe.
Yeah, Vanessa's asking about whether there are significant financial support and scholarships for certain careers like education and nursing. And is there a comprehensive list out there? I'm sure there isn't, right? Because there wouldn't ever be something that useful.
Yeah, never. Yeah. And yes, I mean, I think that's something that we can all do. You know, I'm sure we all have a short list somewhere, but you know, even, you know, like your sinus has some around, like there's additional scholarships students can apply for if they want to major in social justice, if they want to major in theater as a non-theater major. So yes, I wish the magic list was out there, and I always promise parents there isn't. They don't believe us, but that's something that we can work on. Like I'm a Google Doc queen. Like let's start with Vanessa.
I had a question for you, and I have some thoughts on it, but would you discuss maybe interdisciplinary studies and some of the design your own major options that might be out there?
Yeah. I'm starting to see that on the college side a lot in honors programs, but that is starting to trickle down just to the general undergraduate as well. The interdisciplinary are fantastic for a student that, you know, I wouldn't say is unsure, but they just have multiple interests. And it is something when I talk to colleagues at different institutions that you have, you know, to go through several advisors and make sure that it's going to work, because the other piece is making sure you do get graduated in a reasonable amount of time. And to some students that means nothing, and to others that means a lot. But that is, Palmer, that's such a great question, because that is starting to become more and more popular. And Diane, if you want to speak about it on the high school side too.
Yeah, I mean, it's one thing I encourage my families, when they go on the college tour to ask those very questions. I think a lot of our families are overwhelmed with the college tour, campus tour, but to really ask, what happens for students who may not know, can I, combine majors, and graduate in 4 years? How will I be supported for internship placement? I mean, I think we all know too that the internship piece is just almost a requirement anymore for students to engage with and really help them understand, is this a pathway I'm considering? Because there are so many more companies that are looking for those combined pieces, even medical school apps, they want students to engage in leadership and making sure they still have a core base of humanities courses.
Mm-hmm.
So,
Mm-hmm.
drive home those important questions that families should ask while they're, or calling one of you and saying to the rep, like, I have a student interested in, Alaska, and tell me more about what that's going to look like for their double major or their career pathway support.
Well, and
Um,
I always joke that you can do anything you want as long as you've got the money and the time.
right?
Because all
We all
students
know
will
that
say
well.
that they want a triple major. I think the other thing related to internships is to ask what kind of support there is for finding the internships,
Mm-hmm.
because everyone will accept them and so on, but that could be a pretty intimidating prospect for a 19 or 18-year-old.
Right. And I think there's, there are definitely some colleges that, are beginning to require internships as part of their major pathway. And then, there's some colleges too that say, we have a database, it's called Handshake, good luck. So again, that's why I tell parents, just ask them, how do they provide those opportunities for your student when you are paying that tuition?
And I think, oftentimes we hear colleges say we have a co-op with such and such, or we have an agreement with such and such. That doesn't always guarantee they're going to get that internship at that industry partner. It's available, but it could be competitive. And so following up with Diane, when they say that, I think a good question to ask is, what percentage of students get that? Because oftentimes that industry may have co-ops with several different institutions to pull the top 10% from each school to work for them, or whatever the case may be. I just pulled that percentage out of the air. That's not always the case, but it's important to understand what that means and who that's available to and what the process is like.
Or even ask, what do I need to do to make that happen?
Mm-hmm.
So. Hey, thanks so much. This was great. I don't know if you perhaps want to put your contact information into the chat if there's follow-up questions that folks have for you. But thanks so much for joining us. And and I know that the slides are going to be available, and the recording of this presentation will be available probably sometime in the next week. So for those of you who are attending, if you have colleagues that you're like, oh, this would have been a good one for them to listen to, that's still a possibility. Any final thoughts before we move on to a couple of announcements, Diane and Adrienne?
I mean, I just hope that there were some helpful resources, and if we did miss any, feel free to send them so we can include them for other counselors who weren't there to attend, and hopefully you found some helpful nuggets to put in your majors and careers bucket. So thank you for attending.
And Diane, you mentioned that when the PowerPoint is shared, there'll be clickable links within it for the resources too, so it'll be easy to access. Erin, I was wondering if you could talk with our group about our Slack channel and the fact that it's a tool that's available for everyone to use to continue the conversation and so on.
Yeah, absolutely. So anyone who has registered for this series either already has been invited to be part of the PNACAC workspace in Slack, specifically a channel for registrants of this series. And that's where we'll be sharing links to slides, other resources, information about earning CE credit, There's tons of resources in there, but it's also a place for you to continue conversations with each other, ask questions, share ideas, and really kind of create a place of conversation and community of our members. So I'm happy to share my screen really fast, just give you a quick preview of what that looks like. If you're new here today and you haven't attended one of these yet, and you just registered, you will be getting an invitation in the next few days. Maybe you have been invited to Slack and you haven't quite checked it out yet. So this is what it looks like. There is a CC101 community that you will be invited to. And as you can see over here, there is a canvas that you can select on over here on the top right. And we've got all sorts of great resources for you in here and conversation right here in the middle. And so if you ever need help with how to access Slack, I am happy to help. I am our technology chair, so I can give you some of that support. I'll put my contact information in the chat as well. But keep an eye out for the Slack invitation. And we also have some information. I'm going to pull up some slides for Palmer to go over about a few other housekeeping.
We want to make sure that you all have it on your calendar that the 2024 PNACAC conference will be in Salem this year. So maybe especially for those of you in Western Oregon, Western Washington, Willamette University will be hosting it May 22nd to the 24th. You've been listening to Adrienne and Diane give this presentation. There may be things that you can bring to the table. We'll be seeking out session proposals coming up real soon. Think about partnering with someone to propose a session on something that you've learned. Also, some of you might think, or you just know the reality of your building, and getting funding to go to a conference or something like that is difficult. Just be aware that PNACAC does offer some scholarships that can help supplement your attendance. So take a shot at that even. But it's a great chance. It's not a huge conference, so it's very personable. A chance to connect with colleagues on both sides of the desk. It's just a lot of fun. So it's it's not 3 full days, but it covers 3 days. So please put that on your calendar. And then I also wanted to mention, as we wrap up, our next webinar in the College Counseling 101 session is going to be on January 11th, Thursday the 11th. And our topic will be, again, the FAFSA, the big thing that haunts us this year. But it'll be a second session about the FAFSA, updates on that. It's going to be led by Ashley Monroe, who is the financial aid director at University of Alaska Fairbanks. Those of you who did the series last year know that she walked us through financial aid and just hit it out of the ballpark last year. And so we decided to invite her back because she seems to be able to encapsulate things fairly clearly, and she's very expert. So I hope you'll join us on January 11th for that. And with that, I think I'll just say thanks again. Have a great holiday season. Find ways to relax and recharge. And don't worry if the gift you bought your significant other is perfect. It'll be just fine. And we'll look forward to seeing you in January. Thanks so much for joining us. And thanks again, Diane and Adrienne.